Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first is 2020's The Pathless, the action-adventure archery game where a lone hunter must purify the gods and stop a powerful Godslayer from ascending to godhood himself.
Following that is the flipper-filled spin-off that had you catch 'em all by draining batteries even faster with a Rumble Pak in a Game Boy cartridge. 1999's Pokémon Pinball. Not too much in common between these two games, I guess, except they have 2-word titles. They both have satisfying movement systems, and the second word in each title starts with the letter P.
Well, there you go. That's 3 whole things.
It's like I'm taking an ultra hand to reach out and stretch for that one.
I wish I was taking an ultra hand. So I need to give the listeners an idea of this is how much we enjoy getting this show out to you. We are recording on Tears of the Kingdom Day. I have been home for a grand total of half an hour. Zelda is in my Switch, and I'm not playing it right now because we're recording Original Soundchat.
I mean, I found a 25% off deal on a popular online retailer, and they don't have the decency to deliver on launch day, so, you know, there's that. The things you do for physical media these days, I tell you what. That aside, Joe, how you doing? What are you playing?
I've been continuing Etrian Odyssey. I did not finish it before Tears of the Kingdom came out. I'm at the end of the 4th stratum, and things are getting very interesting, where I did not expect this game to ask the question of, but should we really do a genocide? But it did, and it is. So, that's interesting. But I've also been watching, I haven't had time to touch it myself yet, but I've been watching a lot of Idle Showdown, the Hololive fighting game that came out last week, which is shockingly high quality for a free fan game. Like, there's a lot to it, which I'm looking forward to giving it a shot myself probably sometime this weekend. And otherwise, I played 2 demos that are very up our alley. The first one being Harmony the Fall of Reverie, which is the Don't Nod game that Lena Raine's doing the music for. A very interesting way of doing story progression. It has like a flowchart thing that you follow, and like different paths get locked off when you make different decisions, and you unlock certain things only by siding with certain character. It's very weird and visualized very interestingly, and I'm very interested to see where it goes. But I also played, and this is a demo everybody should go check out, I played Stray Gods, the demo for that.
Oh, yeah, hype for this one.
Which is the musical RPG that Austin Wintory is doing the music for. And the way I've been describing it to people is, it's what if the Mass Effect dialogue wheel also decided the tone of a musical? And it's good. It's very good. I had a good time with the demo. The demo's not super long. I think it's about 45 minutes, if that. I definitely recommend it. It's gonna be a cool game, I think.
Heck of a voice cast, too. That one's super impressive. Yeah, I've got my eye on both of those for sure. I probably should give a demo a try if they're out now. That's a good idea. Because I probably should have put some time towards games. I just didn't because of Zelda. Like, I've got Fire Emblem Engage also sitting in my Switch on a rental. And like we talked about last time, like that's a 40-hour game. I'm not fitting that in, less than a week before Zelda. So we'll see. I got a couple games lined up then, but yeah, it's going to be all Zelda all the time shortly. Speaking of which, let's get to some composer follow-up news. I'd like to highlight different goings-on in the game industry and how it relates to composers we've talked about on the show before. Speaking of that, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, out now. Out today of when we're recording, to rave reviews with a Metacritic average of 96. It was 97 at one point. There was a 60% review that kind of knocked it down, but yeah, that's neither here or there. That's does not deserve the vitriol it's getting, but that's Nintendo fans. That's fans of franchises, I guess. Of our interest, though, is the composers have finally been confirmed on the game. There is Hajime Wakai, who is the sound director, and then Manaka Kataoka is back, returning from the Breath of the Wild team, bringing along a few relative newcomers in the Nintendo space. So there's Maasa Miyoshi. She's worked previously on 1-2 Switch and Ring Fit Adventure. Then there's Masato Ohashi. His previous game with Nintendo was Animal Crossing New Horizons. And then also Tsukasa Usui. It seems to be his first game credit out there. And what a game to start on. I'm sure this is going to be one that is in contention for top 10 best soundtracks of the year come the end of the year.
Likely. I think it's probably a good contender in general. My only complaint, and this is not really a complaint because it doesn't, I think it's handled very well, but I do wish music was more present in Breath of the Wild, and I don't think that changes in Tears of the Kingdom. Mm-hmm. But also the way they use the music that is there is very good, so I can't really complain that much. Meanwhile, in very, very smaller scale game news, Decarnation is a 2D seemingly mother-inspired horror game that I played a demo for months ago. And I liked what I played. It's a horror game that is releasing on May 31st, and the reason I bring it up is because the soundtrack, and I didn't know this until I saw a press release about it, soundtrack's by Akira Yamaoka.
Oh.
So that's cool. I'm doubly excited for that game now. It'll be releasing for Switch and PC, so if you're looking for some Yamaoka goodness, yeah, he's scoring another horror game, and that sounds awesome.
Love seeing when he gets more work. It'll be interesting to see how his work gets tied into the Silent Hill 2 remake, and might we hear more about that during Summer Game Fest, which we are less than a month away from that madness that used to be Electronics Entertainment Expo. Rest in pieces, E3. The only events that have been confirmed so far are Jeff Keighley's big Summer Game Fest show on Thursday, June 8th. Xbox has a direct showcase on Sunday, June 11th, followed by a Starfield direct. And then Ubisoft has their Forward show on Monday, June 12th. A rumor that is hot right now is that a PlayStation showcase may be in the works for the last week of May, the 25th of May or so. And then who knows if Nintendo is going to do their annual June time direct. Because what do they have going on for the rest of 2023 now that Zelda's out? They'll have Pikmin in a couple months. Then what?
Who knows? I have had people more in the know than me say they're pretty sure Nintendo has stuff. They just haven't shown us yet. So, who knows? That's all the detail I've been given is stuff. But yeah, I imagine they'll do a direct. I imagine we'll see Pikmin will probably be the headliner, but we'll probably see some stuff for like holidays and stuff like that.
But probably not a hardware, unless they're just being dodgy at their recent earnings. But God, my Switch fan is a jet clearing for takeoff, and it needs a new replacement at some point.
Yeah, I think they were saying April 2024 at the earliest is when we can maybe expect to see one at the earliest. So, who knows? It's all a mystery with Nintendo as usual. Alright, speaking of a mystery that you can't find the end of, this is the Pathless. That segue was fine, I guess. The Pathless was released for PC, iOS, PS4, and PlayStation 5 on November 12th, 2020. I believe it was a PS5 launch title.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Alongside like Bugsnax and I don't remember what else. It came to Switch and Xbox earlier this year on February 2nd, 2023. It was developed by Giant Squid and published by Annapurna Interactive. So what is the Pathless? It is a third-person action-adventure game where the player takes control of the Hunter, areas are basically open world, though they're sort of blocked off from each other. So there's like areas. You can go between the areas, but for the most part, there's no reason to, and you're not gonna. So it's basically different spots, but those spots themselves are open world, if that makes sense. And the hunter can do a few things. First of all, she can sprint as long as her stamina bar isn't empty, but that's where the cool movement of the Pathless comes into play. See, while running, there are a bunch of targets scattered all over the world, and she can aim at those and fire an arrow with her bow, and if she hits a target, it'll not only fully replenish her stamina bar, but it will also give her a short burst of speed as well. And so basically, movement is extremely smooth because you're basically always shooting a target to keep up your momentum when you can. When you start aiming for a target, she like slides and it looks really cool. And she'll lock onto things and aim essentially for you, but you still got to make sure you time it so that there's not, a tree between you and the target, because your arrow can't go through trees. They generally can't do that. And the hunter is also accompanied by an eagle companion who can carry her while in the air. This gives her the ability to glide and also the ability to gain height through flapping its wings. And you can also upgrade the eagle by collecting these crystals. Really, the main thing that does is it gives it more flaps, so you can do it more times before you've exhausted your ability to gain vertical height. So the main gameplay loop of the Pathless is exploring 4 areas of an island, and in each one there are 3 towers that must be lit to weaken a wandering god who is constantly moving around the map. They can trap you in these really not good sections, in my opinion. They're at least short, but if they catch you, essentially you get separated from your eagle and you have to sneak to the eagle to pick it back up without the god that's walking around seeing you, except they have random walking patterns. So it is impossible to predict where they're going to be or where they're going to be looking. So those parts kind of suck. They're my least favorite part of the game, for sure. But towers themselves are lit by collecting light stones, which are earned through solving various types of puzzles. Some of them involve stuff like shooting through a torch so that your arrow sets on fire and lands on another torch and sets that torch on fire. Or using sort of ricochet spots for your arrows to bounce an arrow specifically at a target or something like that. Or there's even moving physical objects and stuff like that. It's a lot of archery puzzles, but there's no one type of puzzle you're going to see. You'll see a bunch, really. And once all 3 towers have been lit, you will then start a boss encounter with that area's god. So the story of the Pathless is, the world is being threatened by a dark curse emanating from an ancient island, one where the world's gods, which are referred to as the Tall Ones, reside. Many have traveled here in order to try and find the source of the curse, but none of them have returned. The hunter is the latest of those travelers, and when she arrives, she immediately comes upon the dying creation god known as the Eagle Mother. Before the hunter can help the Eagle Mother, she is attacked by the Godslayer, a powerful being that happens to also be the source of the curse. He has not only struck down the Eagle Mother, but has corrupted her children into monsters under his control. The Eagle Mother, her life having at last ended, reincarnates into a regular eagle and joins the hunter on her quest. Together they must find a way to cleanse and free the Eagle Mother's children, those being Sarnos, Sauro, Nimue, and Kumo, as well as find a way up to the floating island where the Godslayer resides as he prepares to himself ascend into godhood. So this is where I will ask, what are our experiences with the Pathless?
I am right now staring at the Pathless installed on my phone through Apple Arcade, and it's one of those things where I was like, I probably should I have one of those controllers. I think it's a Backbone. One of those controllers to, play games on your phone and all that. Really, really should use that more often. This would be a perfect game to play with that. I just haven't. So it's been sitting on my phone for a couple years.
Yeah, I cannot imagine playing this game without a controller. Playing this game in touchscreen sounds like an absolute nightmare. But I played it when it came out. Played it on PS4 specifically. Because, it was a launch title for the PS5, and PS5s didn't exist when the PS5 came out, if people remember that. I know you had one.
I did.
But I didn't. I still don't, technically, but there's one in my apartment now at the very least. But I had a good time with it. And then also when it came out on Switch, I'm the one that did the review for it, though I didn't do a video not because I didn't want to, but because it just fell at a time when I just did not have time to put together a video. So it is a text-only review, but I did review the Switch port. It's basically what you would expect of a Switch port of a launch PS5, PS4 game.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, yeah, sure, it plays fine, but the textures are way muddier and you can tell.
I'm sure it's probably the same kind of thing on a phone, too. Yeah.
Likely. Who knows? But yeah, it's a very good game. I accidentally played it in one sitting, even though it is like 5 to 6 hours long.
Oh, okay.
I did not mean to play it in one sitting, and I still distinctly remember starting the game, and then when credits were rolling, my roommate came out of his room to do something in the kitchen, and he saw the credits rolling, and he went, "Really? In one go, huh?"
Mm-hmm.
So it was at least that much of an experience that I stuck with it the whole time. And also, it's one of my favorite soundtracks of the year that it came out, of 2020, which obviously that year had some pretty good selections, but I think this was among the best.
It sure was on our best of. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was number 7 or 6. That's where I want to place it, but I don't remember for sure.
I thought it was number 7 as well, but it looks like it was number 8. Doom Eternal, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, The Pathless, Streets of Rage 4, Ori. Yeah.
Damn, one off. Hey, that's still close enough that I'm going to call it a victory. I'll be real. So, Giant Squid, the studio behind The Pathless, their previous game was Abzu, the scuba diving game that is often referred to as, quote, underwater journey. I think we've mentioned it a couple of times. We definitely mentioned it when we talked about Austin Wintory, because he did the music for that game as well.
Yeah, just Austin Wintory joints lining up here.
Yeah, actually. That's the third time he has been mentioned today. And that won't be the last. And the theme of the game is described by Giant Squid as, quote, finding your own way forward. I didn't find a ton about the development of the game, unfortunately, because if you look up the Pathless interview, they're all with Austin Wintory. And they're all about the music. Which, fine, that's fine. But yeah, I kind of wish I could have found a little bit more about the game itself. So the main inspiration for the game's fluid movement system was that they wanted to avoid having to implement some form of fast travel. And the best way to not need fast travel is making movement really fun. See, Spider-Man. Have you ever used the fast travel in either Spider-Man game?
Truthfully, yes, but only because it was taking advantage of the fast loading on PS5, and that was solely in the Miles Morales game. But the point still stands, yes.
Yeah, moving around in Spider-Man is so fun, I don't feel the need to use fast travel at any point. And the Pathless, I think, works out that way because movement in the Pathless is very, very satisfying. Mostly because the arrows make this whistling sound when you let them go, which is perfectly done sound design. It's very satisfying to hear. So unlike most games, there is actually no death or respawning during the Pathless. Instead, if you take too much damage during a boss encounter or you fail, one of those sections where you have to sneak around to get your eagle back, which you're gonna do that. You just lose some of the crystals that you've collected, the crystals you use to upgrade the eagle. That's all that really happens. And to them, this was their way of keeping the tension of being like in a high stress situation while also avoiding having to respawn the player, because they saw that as something that might break immersion throughout the course of the game. A big inspiration for the idea of the hunter having an eagle companion came from the director Matt Nava's recent interest in Mongolian falconry, which is a form of hunting that has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years in Asia. The Pathless reviewed very well upon release. Its highest Metacritic is 81 on PC, PS4 and PS5 are sitting at 77. The game's movement mechanics are praised, the overall design of the world in general, but a lot of critics did point out, and I kind of agree, that the game kind of features very little variation in gameplay. All the areas outside of looking slightly different feel exactly the same. And the game starts to get very repetitive by the time you reach the fourth area, especially by the time you reach the fourth area, which is a shame, but I think the boss encounters are fun enough and unique enough to sort of get around that. It's just getting to those boss encounters. One of the critics referred to it as sometimes feeling like you're just going through the motions, and honestly, I can't disagree with that. Not that I think it's bad, just yeah, that is kind of a problem. Now, we have already talked about Austin Wintory, the composer of this game, so we're going to talk about somebody who is credited on the soundtrack as an arranger, and that is Susie Seiter. She's a conductor and arranger by trade. One fun fact on her website was that she is married to a composer by the name of Chad Seiter, and in video games, he is most well known for doing the soundtrack to Recore. But he mainly does movies and TV, and she often works with him on projects. In video games, though, Susie Seiter is well known for having served as the conductor for multiple game music-related symphony shows, including The Legend of Zelda Symphony of the Goddess.
Okay.
And Pokemon Symphonic Evolutions, which I actually forgot that tour happened. Symphony of the Goddess I didn't. I wish I was able to see it. She's also done conducting for live shows related to Disney, Star Wars, and even more than that, like something mentioned Frozen Live, her being the conductor for that, essentially. And a quote from her website as well is, quote, Susie Seiter believes that orchestral music should be shared and celebrated by all generations, and she takes great pride in her contributions as a conductor and orchestrator. Originally from Baltimore, Seiter now calls Los Angeles home, where she lives with Chad and their son, Samuel. In terms of discography, this is just the stuff that I recognized, as usual, but in games, she's credited with music preparation on Batman Arkham City, additional orchestration on Journey. She was an arranger on God of War Ascension, all 3 Banner Saga games, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, Abzu. She was an arranger and a conductor on Recore, an arranger on Tooth and Tail, and an arranger on The Long Dark. She was an orchestrator on Erica, obviously an arranger on The Pathless, and she's credited as a booth reader on Hades. I tried to learn what that meant. I couldn't really figure out what it meant. Google was no help. But the broad strokes that I sort of got when I did find information that seemed relevant was that it had to do with, like, when you have an ensemble and you put the vocalist, for instance, in a different area than the band so that there's no cross-contamination of the recordings. And in terms of movies, she is credited with music prep on Spider-Man No Way Home, and she is an arranger on Minions.
It's a lot of Austin Wintory projects in that discography. It's a good partnership.
She very often seems to work with Austin Wintory. He seems to have a very good... I wonder if she's on Stray Gods.
You know, now that you mention that, it's a good question.
I'll have to look that up after the episode. So, obviously, like I said, music composed by Austin Wintory. Susie Seiter served as the arranger. The soundtrack implements a lot of throat singing, though. You're going to hear a ton of that, which was inspired by and also performed by a group called the Alash Ensemble from the country of Tuva, which is a country I had actually not previously heard of. According to Wikipedia, it is a country located in the geographic center of Asia. And the Alash Ensemble performs multiple pieces. Most of them don't have lyrics. They're kind of just the droning throat singing. But the ones that do are in Tuvan, with the exception of one of them. And the way that Austin Wintory described working with the Alash Ensemble was, quote, they frequently are making sounds that are imitating things like camels, and there's a lot of traditions that are meant to evoke wind and all these various things. So there's not a compulsion to always have text when singing, referring to why there's really no lyrics for some of the songs. It also features an instrument from Sweden, and I'm sorry to laugh at this, I really am, but it's called the nyckelharpa, or as it is referred to, and this is the reason I'm laughing, the steampunk violin, which sounds awesome, but I've never heard of this instrument before, and to this day, I'm still shocked that there are instruments I've never heard of, which is neat. Some fun names, though, from the podcast past. We've talked about these people, and they are, of course, involved. Of course, Kristen Nygus is in there. She's in every game. I've just come to decide.
Probably playing more woodwinds that you've never heard of before.
Oh boy, is she, such as the Dizzy, or the Zhao, or the Bansuri, tin whistle, bamboo flutes, and of course, the most mysterious of all, the oboe. There's also the Hunter Choir, which is made up of a group of people that includes names such as Troy Baker, Adriana Figueroa, and Darren Korb. Troy Baker, I believe, is the voice of the Godslayer, specifically. And the Hunter is voiced by Laura Bailey. But those are the only two voiced characters in the game as far as I am aware.
But neat for Darren Korb. I mean, that's a neat little shout out in the credits there.
I mean, he and Austin Wintory also work together quite often, especially because of like the Bastion, the Supergiant concerts, to be fair.
Right, yeah.
So, it doesn't super surprise me. That checks out, I think. I'm more surprised that Ashley Barrett isn't in there. So, this game has a rad soundtrack that I absolutely love. Let's get into it. The Critical 5. First being An Empty Monastery. So this one I picked because it is area music. I want to say it's in Nimue's area, but I don't 100% remember. It might be in Sauros. I don't think it's in Ceranos's. All of those words mean nothing to anybody that hasn't played the game. But I don't know, when you're wandering around in the Pathless, this is essentially very similar to how the game sounds. Almost everywhere you go, it's these very sort of calm orchestral pieces, because outside of the threat of this big dark cloud that is hopefully for your sake on the other side of the area that represents where the tall one is wandering, the corrupted tall one, it's peaceful, it's quiet, there's nobody else there, except for a bunch of corpses. You will find a lot of corpses in this game. Things did not go well on this island. But I think this really brings across that sort of melancholy peace and quiet that you can find in the landscapes of the Pathless very well. And so it's the one that stands out the most to me in terms of the music for that type of situation in game.
And it just has that Austin Wintory feel, you know? Like, I think you could probably drop this in some place like Journey. And granted, a few instrument choices aside, it'd be different, but it's got a similar, desolate but adventurous feel to it. I don't know. It's just one of those things where you start to listen to enough of these tracks from composers enough, and it's like, oh, it's got that same sort of style.
Mm-hmm. I can definitely hear that. But for me, the most impressive songs on the soundtrack are the boss themes, which the next three are all boss themes. The first one being Cernos. So all of the bosses have 3 stages to them. The first one is chasing it to lead it to like a temple where then 2 stages of a proper boss fight happen. And I remember this part specifically plays during the chase with Cernos. And I don't know, the part in the clip might be my favorite part of music in the entire game. Well, up there at the very least. I don't know why, it just feels really cool. And it was the exact moment where I was like, oh, I like this soundtrack. This is good stuff. I love the boss themes, but Cernos, I think, might be one of my favorite.
That stringed instrument at the end, is that maybe a bouzouki? It kind of has that, I don't know, like Middle Eastern sort of feel to it. Mm-hmm. I feel like we've heard that kind of stringed instrument in soundtracks before. It's always super cool. And to give it kind of that highlighting there, with this kind of almost jig, like just this bouncy energy to it, and then transitioning into that. That's super cool. I definitely remember this piece standing out from our best of 2020, and it was good to hear this one again.
Critical track number 3 is yet another boss theme, this one being Nimue. That's probably Kristen Nigas, right? In the clip? Like, that's...
I feel like it's gotta be, yeah.
100%, that has to be her. But, yeah, Nimue is overall my least favorite one to deal with, because before being purified, his monster form is that of a Hydra with multiple heads.
Oh.
Good luck sneaking around that. I think this song is a lot of fun, mostly for that woodwind part. I believe that plays during the second phase, like when you are actually now in a temple fighting Nimue properly. And I don't know, it has really good energy to it, and I absolutely adore this song. And again, it's one of my favorites. I don't like it as much as Cernos, and I don't like it as much as the next track, but it is 100% there in the top 3, obviously, as it is in the Critical 5.
I agree. It's got that kind of energy to it for this phase of the fight. Just a lot going on here, and you're really hearing all the elements at play. It sounds super good. And yeah, the flute is a nice touch to kind of bring it a higher frequency, almost a kind of levity in a way to it. Also good to point out that this was not on the Critical 5 on that best of list. So yes, a good one to include into the mix this time, and I agree with this decision.
Yeah, I'm not 100% why I decided to switch them out, but the one that was there is at least on the cutting room floor, so we will still hear it. But yeah. The 4th critical track is my favorite song in the game in general. This is the final boss theme, The Path to Salvation.
Thank you.
So, like I said, this is the final boss theme for the final confrontation with the Godslayer himself, which is a really, really cool boss fight, honestly. And this track goes a few places because it's a whole sequence, like later on in the track, not in the clip. The clip is near the beginning, which is the part you're going to hear during the regular fight. But later on in the piece, there's like this very quiet part with this triumphant sort of build-up, this heroic thing, which is one of my favorite musical moments in the game, just in general, because of the moment that happens during that part. But for the most part, as far as I remember, and I couldn't find this article anymore, and I'm going to have to dig deeper and hopefully post it on the Twitter, but somebody did like an interview, it might have been Polygon, with Austin Wintory that was specifically about composing this song, and about how it was apparently super difficult and nuts to figure out because something, I think time signatures, if I remember correctly, it was apparently an ordeal. But this boss fight is awesome. This song is awesome. It has this really, really tense feel. Like, it feels more hectic than any of the God boss fights because, and I think it's because the gods are sort of lashing out and feral when you fight them, but the Godslayer knows exactly what he's doing, and he is out for blood, and you are not going to stop him. So that sense of awareness, I think, is reflected in the tone of this song in general, and I think that's really, really cool. I really like this piece.
It does have quite a sound to it, and you can definitely hear the complexity. It does not surprise me that it was so arduous to create. I love how the brass lines are going and how they're mixed in. Just excellent, mixed with that same stringed instrument, probably bouzouki or whatever. You get the throat singing in at the end, so you finally hear an example of that at the end of the clip. That's really cool. Even a little bit of the flute in there. It's like all things going all out. And yeah, I think that's definitely fitting for final boss territory.
And our final track on the Critical 5. This is A Land Which Was Not My Own. So I mentioned earlier that when the Alash ensemble did lyrics in their stuff for this game, it was usually in Tuvan, except for one, and this is the one. The lyrics for this song are in Mongolian. And I did actually find a good chunk of information on the composition of this song in general in one of the interviews with Austin Wintory that I found. And a quote that I really, really found super interesting. And it does get kind of political, so I apologize, but also I don't. Quote, I wrote the lyrics in English, and they are very basic and simple, and so to speak to the message of the game. Ironically, the game unintentionally feels very 2020 because the whole premise of it is that the hunter encounters this character called the Godslayer, and he's sort of a self-appointed messianic figure who is saying, I can save the world, trust me, give me power, I will lead you to safety. The world is chaotic and demands order, and the whole idea is that the world is intrinsically pathless, and I will forge a path for people to follow, and they will thank me for it. It's almost Trump-esque in a way.
Yeah, 100%. Don't apologize for that. That's exactly hitting the nail on the head.
Pretty much. But this song is absolutely gorgeous. It kind of makes sense that the lyrics are very simple, but in that same interview, he mentions like, yeah, I wrote them simple and kind of figured they would sound better in Mongolian.
Yep, and I think they do. I mean, as far as the orchestration goes, I get big apotheosis vibes from the instrumentation at the end there, without the vocals and all, but it does have a good sense of finality and ending to it, and That is really interesting. I would not have picked up on the lyrics are really simple in English because, yeah, the Mongolian does kind of disguise that quite well.
So tracks on the cutting room floor. I need to talk about the other two boss themes that weren't on the Critical 5 because, again, they're my favorite moments in the game, and all of them are absolute bangers. The first one being the one that used to be on the 5 when we did the Best of 2020, this being Sauro. The strings in the clip are so good. Obviously, this plays during the second boss fight in the game, and I believe this plays during the boss proper? It might play during the chase. It sounds like it could go either way. I don't 100% remember, but it's such a good feeling piece because Sauro is a big lizard. So... like, I don't know why, but this song kind of fits that vibe. And again, cello, I'll take cello every day of my life, as well as some really, really good just string ensemble in general. And this song uses it to fantastic effect.
Yeah, where we heard an Austin Wintory score that uses cello in a solo line.
Huh.
Yeah. I also get Assassin's Creed Syndicate vibes from the kind of energy and the bounciness of this as well. Just it's not as, that had more of the chamber orchestra, the stripped down instrumentation, but the feel, the key, the tones kind of made me think of that game and how I want to play Assassin's Creed Syndicate again at some point. Huh.
One day I'll play it at all.
Anyway, it's tracks like this that really make me think of Austin Wintory's great work and how I need to finally fire this game up on my phone.
And the other track on the cutting room floor, the final of the boss themes that we can talk about, this is Kumo. So this is going to sound negative when I say it. It's my least favorite of the boss themes. It's still really good. It's still one of my favorite songs in the game. But also, hey, in the clip, there's some good woodwind stuff, probably still, Kristen Nagas. It has this kind of weight to it, which makes sense because Kumo is the strongest and youngest of Mother Eagle's sons, and also a giant bear.
Okay, good, because I was going to be like, Kuma?
Yeah, pretty much. So, like, having a weight to it feels fitting, because he's by far the biggest of the tall ones you are going to fight. And, I think this song brings that across very well. And again, the use of woodwinds, which I think is that the oboe? I assume that's the oboe, right?
If it's there, it's disguised pretty well. I'm not going to deny it's there, but it's kind of mixed in with everything else there. I think I'm more impressed by the percussion that's going on. There's it adds a lightness to it. And I don't know if that's meant to represent your lightness of movement, or despite this big beast, and as big as he is, he still moves nimbly. It's really interesting to hear, just the little tambourine in there, just some other percussion instruments there. Nice piece. I agree that the other ones stand out more, but this is still a good highlight.
Yeah. Again, all of the boss themes are just absolutely fantastic. They're my favorite moments in the game by far. I probably could not recount a single puzzle to you at all, but I can remember how every single boss fight goes. So that should say something. So what will I never forget about the Pathless? It's the boss fights. They're so good. They're really, really good. And movement in this game, it is, I compared it earlier, but it is up there with Spider-Man for like one of the most fun games to move around in. For how kind of, I don't want to say empty, but how repetitive feeling the world is, it kind of gets past that by just movement being really satisfying and fun to do in general, which is quite an accomplishment. I think they pulled that off super well. And also, I just think the soundtrack is very, very good in general.
Yeah, while it's still part of Apple Arcade, I definitely need to play it with that Backbone controller. Or if you have iOS and you have Apple Arcade through your Apple plan there, yeah, give it a shot, because I'm definitely more interested now after hearing the soundtrack. So great work, Austin Wintory and team.
So for our transition, we like to highlight a fan remix or a fan cover. I didn't find a ton. I expected to find more A Land Which Was Not My Own covers, though it being in Mongolian might be why there aren't a lot. But even then, like, people cover foreign language songs all the time, but I could not find, like, any. But I did manage to find a guitar cover of a song that we did not talk about on the Critical 5, which, honestly, if I had a third track on the cutting room floor, this would probably be on there. But it is a track called From the Antlers, done by the YouTube channel Dan Jones Guitar. And it translates very well to guitar, and I think he does a great job with this cover. So please enjoy that, and we will be right back.
Time to talk about one of my favorite games from my youth. Although it's a weird roundabout way to cover it finally on the show. It'll make sense when we get to the composer section. Let's talk about Pokémon Pinball. We talk about Pokemon a lot on this show. So much that we have talked about Pokemon spin-offs a lot on this show, outside of the main generation Pokemon games. We've talked about Pokken Tournament on episode 42, Pokemon Snap on episode 85, Pokemon Trading Card Game, which is probably the closest comparison to this game. That was on episode 99. And then there was a Pokemon spin-off week with Pokemon Conquest and Pokemon Coliseum. That was on episode 157. For Pokemon Pinball, though, it was released in Japan for Game Boy on April 14th, 1999. It was released with the intent of being played on the recently released Game Boy Color. There are specifically some color features in there, and it looks and plays best on Game Boy Color, but you could also play it on Game Boy, I suppose. It wasn't one of those color-specific cartridges like Pokemon Crystal would be. North America would get the game on June 29th, 1999, so a couple months later. Australia, a couple weeks later, on July 13th. But then Europe would have to wait more than a year. They got Pokemon Pinball on October 6th, 2000. Sadly, there is no way to play the original Pokemon Pinball outside of its original form, at least officially. The game has never had a virtual console release. Shocking. Can't believe that. Nintendo Switch Online. Let's fix that. Get to it, please.
I mean, hey, if Trading Card Game is currently on the list of things that are confirmed to be coming out, I'd say there's a pretty good chance.
I mean, you got to at this point. What could be holding it up? I don't know. Pokemon Pinball is developed by Jupiter. That's the development team that now makes the Picross S games, as well as HAL Laboratory. And the game is, of course, published by Nintendo. Pokemon Pinball, as you might expect, is a pinball game. It's made up of 2 screens that are stacked vertically on top of each other, and you hit a ball that is designed like a Pokeball with the flippers that are at the bottom of the table, and you see what happens. Of course, that's a gross simplification of pinball because there are spots on the table that you want to specifically hit with the ball. As long as you don't miss the ball with the flippers and you lose the ball in the dead zone at the very bottom of the board, because when you do that, you lose your turn, and losing 3 turns means the game is over. Though, you can earn extra turns if you score enough points. There are 2 boards in Pokemon Pinball, and if you've guessed that, well, the game came out after Generation 1, it's before Generation 2, yes, the 2 boards are called Red Field and Blue Field. Each board has its own details and gameplay elements to make it unique, but they have the same fundamental locations for playing and progressing through the game. Each board has different playable locations that represent different points throughout the world of Kanto in the Pokemon Red and Blue games, and these determine which Pokemon will be available for capture when you're in this location on the board. You choose one at random to start the game and you launch the first ball into play, but there will eventually be a means to start a sequence that allows you to move locations if you choose. And when you do this, it means that new areas are accessible that weren't before in the first go-round. So, how do you catch a Pokemon in Pokemon Pinball? Well, you have to first activate catch mode, and you shoot the ball around the main loop at least 2 to 3 times when you go counterclockwise, so shoot it up the right bank. And when you start the catch mode, it opens up a 2-minute window of opportunity where, of course, a player can attempt to capture a Pokemon. You'll see a silhouette of a Pokemon in the center of the screen, and so you must hit the pop bumpers in the top window. These are Voltorb on the red field and Shelder on the blue field. Hit those 6 times. Each hit will unlock 1/6 of the silhouetted image of the Pokemon that's available for capture, and once the image is complete, boom, a little sprite of the Pokemon appears on the board in the center of the bottom window, in which you then must hit it 4 times with the ball to be captured. Now, only basic forms of Pokemon, or Pokemon that don't evolve at all, are able to be captured this way. Well, then how do you catch evolved forms? Well, then you need to go into evolution mode, and that involves hitting the ball up the left bank on the big loop, hit that clockwise 3 times, trigger evolution mode, and you select one of your captured Pokemon from the current game that is in progress only, and you attempt to evolve it into another form. So you'll select a Pokemon, there'll be targets that'll appear on the playing field. There are 7 on the red board, there's 6 on the blue board. Only 3 of them have the items that you need to evolve a Pokemon. So they can be like experience, there's like an EXP. They can be a link cable. If it's like, I want to evolve Machoke into Machamp or a Haunter into Gengar. Well, you got to find the little link cable items. If you hit one of those 3 areas, boom, the little item appears on the board and you have to hit the item with the ball to collect it. If it's not one of those areas, it's kind of a time-wasting mechanic. You got to shoot the ball around the loop to try to hit the next area. Again, all this within 2 minutes. Collect the 3 items. The hole in the center of the board opens up. Sink the ball in the hole. It evolves the Pokemon. Once you collect 3 Pokeball icons, you get 1 for a successful catch of a Pokemon, 2 for a successful evolution. You can then play a bonus minigame to rack up extra points. And if you clear the minigame, you can move on to the next one. It can ultimately then lead you to an intense showdown with the game's final boss. And so it goes, looping on, catching, evolving, moving, bonus, catching, it keeps going until you lose all your turns, and then you can have your game potentially commemorated in the high scores. There isn't a story to Pokemon Pinball, as you might not be shocked by that news. Basically, you gotta catch them all. Pokemon Gettodaze. Collect all 151 Pokemon, yes, 151, to fill up your Pokédex. And the Pokédex is saved between individual games, so it's basically built up over time. Play again and again and again some more. Big question, can you catch them all with your flippers? Joe, here's where I'll ask you, after explaining literally the entire game, what are your experiences with Pokemon Pinball?
Completely non-existent. I'm disappointed to hear that you don't fight Team Bumper. Like, come on, it's right there. There could be the bumpers and everything. Come on.
Gosh, not even the sequel they didn't take advantage of anything like that, man.
Call me, Game Freak. I can make this game for you. I don't know how to make a pinball game, but by God, I can learn. I have never played Pokemon Pinball ever. Like, even just hearing the description, it was like, man, that's a lot. A lot of it just went straight over my head. But, I mean, pinball's cool. I like pinball. Who doesn't like pinball? I mean, a lot of people don't like pinball, but like, who cares what they think? And I like Pokemon, so put together. Hey, why not?
Absolutely. And that was kind of the winning ticket for me when I was, having a Game Boy Color growing up as my first game system. We talked about this last week with the Zelda Oracle games, but Pokemon Pinball was right up my alley. Before waiting for Generation 2, loving Pokemon Red and Blue. Oh yeah, I owned Pokemon Pinball. Wow, what a game. What a game. I'm a little scared to think about how much time I put into Pokemon Pinball because I did complete that Pokédex, and that's insane. That's something an insane person does. That's got to be over 100 hours, I would say, to do something like that, especially as a dumb kid who doesn't have much experience with games and doesn't have a way to min-max, certain strategies to catch them all.
Yeah, but when you're a kid, you have all the time in the universe.
You sure do, except when you're trying to play this game quietly at night and
before the batteries run out.
Well, I mean, yeah, the batteries, but also that Rumble Pak. I don't know, we didn't get to talk about the Rumble Pak. We'll talk about the Rumble Pak, but yeah, that Rumble Pak does not make for a silent playing, let's just say. I adore this game. It is simple. It does have some weird wonky stuff going on with it, but it's so simple. And to the point where when there was a sequel, yeah, that was fun, but it loses some of the simplistic charm with it. I would do terrible things to get this on Nintendo Switch Online. I'm going to start my little campaign for that right now.
I'm telling you, I think it probably has a really good, again, if trading card games coming, it's a matter of time, honestly. And also, Nintendo has been really good about just grabbing weird crap for those things and just putting them on.
It's got more of a chance than Red and Blue do, let's just say that much. Anyway, as you can guess, there's hardly any development information on Pokemon Pinball. Even looking up the staff credits, it looks like there's 12 people on the staff that made this game. I don't even know how you'd look up the staff credits in this game. There's staff credits music. It's hard to say. But yeah, basically not a lot of info out there. Though, yes, the most notable thing about this game is the Rumble Pak that was in the cartridge. It was this big, bulbous thing that stuck out for you to put in a AAA battery into. And then it would time up rumble vibrations with certain points in the game. Is it hitting the bumpers? Is it hitting the ball hitting the wall as it goes around the chute? Is it Pika? And bzzz, as the Pikachu tries to save your ball on the sides of the field. Yeah, there's a little bit crushed Ikue Otane Pikachu voice in there every now and then, which is great. But yeah, when you have a little shock to send the ball basically back on life support to save you, yeah, brrr, rumble on your cartridge. Very loud, very obnoxious. But you know what? At the time, really cool to have in the palm of your hands.
A simpler time.
Yeah, before rumble was just a standard in every controller for a console. The game reviewed fairly well, with a game rankings average of 81.73%. Critics said it was fun to play, it goes beyond just a simple cash grab for the Pokemon phenomenon, and the Rumble Pak is a neat gimmick, I guess. But then criticisms included the lack of other pinball-related elements, the, quote, gratuitous Pikachu appearances, end quote, and the game's poor physics. Yeah, there's some weird stuff that can happen, but...
Gratuitous Pikachu appearance? He's the mascot!
Yeah.
It's like playing a Disney game and be like, Mickey Mouse is too much in this.
Maybe hearing the voice too much, maybe that kind of got to people. Pokemon Pinball is the 7th best-selling Game Boy game of all time at 5.3 million units sold. No, Joe, I won't do a pop quiz like last time because it's a lot of Mario, it's a lot of Pokemon, as you might expect.
Yeah, it checks out.
But Pokemon Pinball, the 7th best, I'm a little surprised it's that high.
Yeah, that is kind of shocking, honestly. Not bad.
Though, not shockingly, no awards cited for this time. And for a little Game Boy game on a Pokemon spinoff, yeah, I'm not too shocked about that. There is that sequel we have mentioned, though, and that's Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire. It was released in the summer of 2003 on Game Boy Advance, shortly following the success of the 3rd generation of Pokemon games. Among the many improvements, the greatest one is a scrolling camera that follows the movement of the ball, instead of breaking up the boards onto 2 screens and then it's got to go in between the two. Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire even got a virtual console release on Wii U in 2015. But there have been no Pokemon Pinball games since. I would honestly be a little scared to see one now just because of how many Pokemon there are. I mean, there was a lot for Ruby and Sapphire to begin with, but 151 kind of felt like the sweet spot, and it would just be unruly right now.
That being said, there are like 3 different studios that exist now that just make virtual pinball games. So,
that's a good point. So maybe the Pokemon company needs to call one of those up. It's a complicated situation to talk about the composer for Pokemon Pinball, because there was one man credited with composing the music, and that's Go Ichinose. Well, we've talked about Go Ichinose before on this show. Who does the sound effects? Oh, that's Morikazu Aoki. We talked about him before. Who is the sound director? It's Junichi Masuda. So, like, bang, bang, bang. Those are some of the 3 big names in Pokemon music, especially at the time. So let's look to the sequel in what we call the Super Mario Galaxy approach for original Soundchat. And there's a name, Kazuya Suyama, attached to composing the music on Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire. And then there's just no information for him online. Like, nothing at all. Not even a VGMDB profile, which really tells you something. What does Kazuya Suyama's discography even look like? He did a few game soundtracks in the early 90s that were Japan only, like Akazukin Cha-Cha, Bing Bing Bingo, and Super Air Diver 2. Oh, okay. Then composition on Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire, and then he gets special thanks on the Generation 3 Pokemon games on Game Boy Advance. So that's Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Fire Red, Leaf Green. Special thanks on that one. And that's literally it. At least 3 people out of the 12 that made this game tied to the music. Junichi Masuda, director. Go Ichinose, composer. Morikazu Aoki, sound effects. But
I'm kind of surprised that, like, the big names were involved in this spin-off. That would not happen today.
That is true. And it's interesting to hear how some of these themes get repurposed from games or other media. And so, yeah, you're right. I think it's just a different time in game music. But let's get to one of the soundtracks that defined my youth in learning about video games, and that's the 5 critical tracks for Pokémon Pinball. Gotta start with this first one, of course. It is Title Screen. If you're going to come back to play game after game and round after round of pinball, you're gonna need an infectiously catchy song to come back to every time you boot up the game, and boy, does this fit the bill. I feel like it's not like the definitive song of the game or anything like that, but it's one that just, right at the start of the soundtrack, so to speak, again, not a game that got an official soundtrack release or anything like that, but a song that really starts the experience as you turn on your Game Boy. It almost feels like a circus, like a carnival, and that's probably how a pinball game should feel, especially tied to this franchise.
It sounds like Super Mario Land. Well, Super Mario Land 2 specifically. That's all I can think of when I hear it, which a lot of that might just be that Game Boy Music all uses the same sound font, essentially, because that's how the sound chip on the Game Boy works, as far as I am aware. But yeah, that's the tone I get. It's very catchy, I agree, but also, yeah, I just hear Mario for some reason. Feels very Game Boy Mario.
Yeah, I can see that. I hadn't really heard that before, but that's a fair comparison to make, especially, it's one of the better soundtracks on Game Boy as well. Number 2 on the Critical 5 for Pokemon Pinball is where I spent 80% of my time, maybe. I love Bluefield. Bluefield is definitely the more beginner-friendly field. It has some more forgiving angles on its different elements of the board. It's one where if you hit the ball right up the middle, it has this arrow that kind of redirects to a slowpoke to the left and a cloister to the right for the evolution and catch mode respectively, or straight up ahead into all the shelters there to pop, kind of pop around there. It's just definitely a more friendly board. And as you know, I played blue version. That was one I was drawn to more. Now we'll get to talking about Redfield in a bit. It has its moments and its neat little things, but yeah, this is where I spent most of the time in Pokemon Pinball, just out of preference. And just really honing the craft and getting scores that were in the billions. I wish I could, boot up my copy. It's probably buried somewhere. I do have it, or maybe even the internal battery doesn't work anymore. I feel like I got in like the 30 billion range of a score. Just ridiculous. But like if there was one game I played way too much and got too good at, it was probably Pokemon Pinball. Here I am come to, realize on this soundtrack, listening to it, I'm like, it kind of does sound a little bit familiar. And then you have people noting in different internet comments that like, this might as well be the beta version of what would become the Ecruteak and Cianwood themes in Pokemon Gold and Silver. It's a faster version of it. It's almost like a beta version of it. But it's like, you know what? That's pretty true. And it makes sense with Go Ichinose, one of the big Pokemon composers at the time, especially during this time, going into, prep on Gen 2. Had never thought of it that way before, but it's exactly what it is.
Yeah, the instant I heard this song, it was like, that's not Gen 1. What? Wait, what? I picked up on it immediately as a Gen 2 child. That is really, really interesting. Like, there's no question in my mind this is related to the song that eventually became the music used for those two towns. It sounds exactly like it, just small parts of the melody just taken out. It's too similar to not be. There's no way it's not.
So that's a really neat thing, and we'll get to another very interesting tie for a theme on the blue field in a bit. But before we do, we'll got to talk about the other big field in the game. Number 3 on the Critical 5 for Pokemon Pinball. This is, of course, Red Field. If you look on the box art for Pokemon Pinball, or from the video version of original Soundchat, you see the album art there. That's the look of the Red Field. That's Red Field. You got that Ditto kind of guarding the evolution gate in the weird corner. It was just some odd angles. I think it's a tougher one to play. You got to be more precise, especially you can sometimes lose the ball going all the way around the big loop just because of some of those weird angles. If you don't have enough velocity going around, it's definitely less forgiving than the blue field. But if I wanted to catch them all, I had to put some time into the red field to catch the specific Pokemon and locations that are only available on the red field. So yes, also got very used to this theme, and of course going back to it as an adult, as a Pokemon music fan. Yeah, that sure is a take on the Viridian, Pewter, and Saffron theme from Pokemon Red and Blue. Just a different key down, but dun 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 da da dun da 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 sure is that melody from those starting towns, and then Saffron, how they all share the same theme. But yeah, a tougher map for sure, but a nice take on a classic town theme in the original Gen 1 games.
And this just solidifies my 100% sure the last one has to be based on town. Like, maybe he was working on the music at that time and they just sort of said, yeah, screw it, we can use this one here.
Mm-hmm.
But it has to be related. The other one also being based on a town theme. Come on. This is not my favorite town theme, but it is definitely the most classic one. So it is a very, very good choice of one to sort of base this song around. I'm a Celadon City kind of guy.
My man.
Celadon music's so good. But yeah, like, if you're going to pick one, I can't blame you for picking this one. It's a lot of fun. Man, Pokemon music in 8-bit just sounds so good.
It really does. It's a classic for a reason, for sure. Let's get to number 4 on their Critical 5 for Pokemon Pinball. Probably the coolest bit of trivia in this whole game. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it might melt some minds. This is Catch Bluefield. This stomps all over the catch and evolution theme on the red field. This is just so much better, so much catchier. It is so good, and another reason why I spent an inordinate amount of time on blue field was when you're going through the catch and evolution modes in these 2-minute stretches that you have, you gotta have a real catchy song going here. And boy, is this one. The red field catch theme, it does a little remix of the bike theme from Pokemon Red and Blue. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. But as a kid, like, I don't know what this is, but it's really catchy and I like it. And then again, you go back to it as an adult, and maybe if you were listening for the first time in years, you're like, is that Mesaze Pokemon Master? The first opening from the Japanese anime? It sure is. It 100% is. Like, it is undeniable that is what it's covering, and it is so cool that American kids just get this catchy song without any context to what it is and just think, oh, it's a catchy little bop. And Japanese kids would have known what it is immediately.
I think I knew about this specifically because I think you brought this up in an episode of Show Me Your News.
Oh, probably, yeah.
Like, I have this vague memory of already hearing you talk about this at some point.
Well, now you get to listen to the track for yourself there. How does it stack up?
I mean, it sounds very good. I don't think I've ever actually heard the original Japanese OP. The only OPs I've ever heard actually are the English ones. Are the English ones that go up to Johto, and then also the Alola one because a bunch of people kept posting it to me for some reason.
You mean you didn't even hear it when it came back in the big Ash versus Leon moment?
Oh no, I did see that actually.
Yeah.
But in the dub, they replaced it with our first OP, and it's awesome.
It is awesome, yes.
It's such a cool musical moment. But yeah, it's always very interesting to hear, like, you can definitely tell that it's not a song that was originally composed at 8-bit because it's a little more busy than all the others.
Yeah, way more lyrical for sure. But yeah, just a great callback and just a delightful thing to discover about this game. You want to talk original tracks made for this game, though? I guess if you have a final boss like this, you gotta have some interesting elements going. Number 5 on the critical tracks for Pokemon Pinball is, of course, Mewtwo Stage. This is an insane track for a Pokemon spin-off game. Are you kidding me? So Mewtwo is the bonus stage after you clear the other 2 bonus stages for each field. So on Red Field, there's a Diglett and Dugtrio stage. Then there's a Ghastly Hunter Gengar stage. Then you get to Mewtwo stage. On Blue Field, it's Meowth. And then a Seal stage. And then Mewtwo. If you beat the Mewtwo stage, it goes back and resets. So you got to do all the bonus stages again to get back to Mewtwo. But if you intentionally, like, stop just short of beating him, look, put it this way. When you hit Mewtwo, after you deplete all his psychic balls that are kind of creating a little shield around him, when you hit Mewtwo, it's like 1,000,000 points a hit. So you got to be smart about it. Min-max your score a little bit. And just try to keep Mewtwo on the bonus stage to maximize your score by hitting him. Anyway, you hear this song a lot if you get really good at the game. But it's crazy the things that are going on these tracks here for a Game Boy. Just to try to get like a little trance going and then a lot going on here. A weird Pokemon Pinball final boss.
I feel like there was just this era where they were all sitting around a table like, what's the fun? What? We don't have an antagonist we can put in this.
Mewtwo!
I don't know, Mewtwo. Just put Mewtwo. Let's just put it. He's like Stadium. There's this. I want to say there's like multiple other games where it's like, yeah, the main final boss is Mewtwo.
I mean, Puzzle League and all that, but he was the antagonist in the movie, so why not?
I guess. Yeah, this song is nuts for a Game Boy song. That's so much. It's so much. In a good way. It's very, very cool, but it's way more than I expect from a Game Boy piece.
Got a couple tracks here on the cutting room floor. These are fun in their own way, I guess. The first one of these two is Meowth Stage. The very first bonus stage on the blue field is the Meowth bonus stage. And so this is the music that plays during the 2 minutes that you have in that little mini game. Meowth is wandering across a little mini pinball area. You gotta hit him with the Pokeball to trigger payday coins, like from his forehead, to be dispersed onto the field. And if you hit them multiple times, multiple coins will be out on the field. If you collect coins in succession, then boom, 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 they go in multipliers for the score. If you hit them again, the multiplier resets, unfortunately. So that's the gist. You gotta hit them enough times to trigger enough coins. If you collect all those coins, it'll clear the stage. But as far as the song goes, just a delightfully catchy, weird, funny song that just goes with hitting Meowth with the Pokeball. I feel like it's the perfect song for that, and a track that I knew had to be here. It wasn't going to be on the Critical 5, but yeah, once you get your bonus games going, on Bluefield especially, it's this one for sure.
Once again, this is a Mario GBA song. It just has the same energy to it. I don't know how else to put it. It just feels so much like it belongs in a GBA Mario game. And in a good way. Those are good, but like, just the energy to it in general.
For sure. And I think it also could go with like a Game Corner kind of vibe. Granted, Gen 2 Game Corner would go nice and hard, but even beyond this, but
as somebody that just spent some time in the Gen 1 Game Corner, it's not as good as the Gen 2 Game Corner.
No, not at all. But this kind of has the coin-based whimsy, if you will. You want to talk about chaos, though, and just hectic tension, that would be the other track here on the cutting room floor, and that is Map Mode. On the sides of the fields, if you hit Diglett on the red field or Psyduck on the blue field, if you hit their heads 3 times on one side in relatively quick succession, you trigger map mode. And so then you have to shoot the ball around the big loop, whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise, then get the ball in the middle of the board, and then you can move locations. But you only have 30 seconds to do so, so thus, this song is just trigger-inducing for hectic chaos. Go, go, go. Gotta move, move, move. Get the ball around the loop. Do it. You can't mess up. I mean, that's if you want to move. If you want to get to some of the locations like Victory Road and Indigo Plateau, you gotta move. You're going to have to hear this song if you want to get good at the game and filling out that Pokedex. It just creates instant anxiety for me in a good way.
You see a title like Map Mode, and this is not even remotely what I would have expected it to sound like. This is a Crane game song.
Yeah.
Like, this sounds like something I'd hear in a Crane game that's purposely trying to like, don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up, and mocking me when I do. So yeah, I guess that fits the hectic. That sounds like hell. That sounds like anxiety hell.
It is. It is, especially, especially when you're trying to get, those last few on your Pokedex. It's ridiculous. What will I never forget about Pokemon Pinball? Yeah, obviously the anxiety that comes with certain elements. Damn. When you do the ridiculous set of circumstances to try to catch Mew, you better not mess up in those 2 minutes. Oh my God. Oh my God. Basically, I will never forget the hours that I put towards this game as a kid. I would be scared to actually be presented. You know how like there are different questions where it's like, what information would you want to be presented with? Like a counter of, things like how many steps you've taken in your life, how many times you said hi to someone. How many hours have I put into Pokemon Pinball as a kid? I want to know, but I don't want to know. Basically, I'm not optimistic for the mainline Pokemon games to come to Nintendo Switch Online. I think there's a lot of hoops to jump through with passing it to Pokemon Bank or, the equivalent and all that. Pokemon Home now, I guess.
Also, I feel like Pokemon Company would sooner just sell them separately.
Oh, yeah, they want to monetize that for sure. But I feel like let's start the talk now. Like, can I call my shot on this podcast like you do on Smasher Pieces? I want Pokemon Pinball on Nintendo Switch Online, all of the Rumble features intact so badly. It's a ridiculous ask, but I think one that's not unreasonable.
Yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable at all. I think there's a very good chance, but they put out a long line of things that are on their way to get through first, I guess. Look, if they're re-releasing Pokemon Stadium for the first time ever, Pokemon Pinball has a high chance.
Also, trading card game to be picked before this. Like, I think trading card game is a better soundtrack. Don't get me wrong. We know that we've talked about that on the show before. A lot of fond memories with that. But Pinball, man. Pinball. All right. The Pathless. Pokemon Pinball. Their titles with 2 words. They've got P's in the start, the second word of that, but also really satisfying movement in the Pathless, and also the ball flipper. That's super satisfying in Pokemon Pinball. It all works somehow. Totally different soundtracks, but you know what? That's the beauty of this show, and that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakeasy. Joe is over at StringPixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with H YouTube channel, but it's that MP3 podcast version that you want, and that's hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. It's where Joe's other podcast, Smasher Pieces, is hosted, and you can find Smasher Pieces and Original Soundchat wherever you get your podcasts, on catchers all around the globe, from Apple Podcasts to Google Podcasts, even on Spotify, where we have a feed of podcast episodes on a big old feed, but also we have a video game music playlist where if we talked about a game track on this show and it's on Spotify, gets added to a huge Spotify playlist. Joe, what's being added this week?
The Pathless is on Spotify, but no for Pinball.
That's not a surprise. We've got some tracks from the Pathless already on that playlist from Best of 2020, but got a few more there.
Yeah, two will be added, being Nimue and Kumo, I believe, specifically.
Excellent. Love to hear that. When you're done listening, you can find the show on social media at Soundchat OST. Leave some feedback for us. How are we doing with these episodes? Suggestions for games to cover on the show. All right, Joe, who are we talking about next week?
Next week, I do not know how this is going to go, but I will be talking about Vasily Kashnikov.
Likewise, I will be talking about David Buckley. To play us out, let's highlight a fan cover, a fan remix. You know what? Not too difficult, I think, to find covers of Pokemon Pinball music, especially when it's the blue field. Again, there must be something about the blue field. Maybe like me growing up, a lot of people were more drawn to that more beginner-friendly pinball field. And blue field was covered by Chris Salad on YouTube. All one word, K-R-I-S, Salad. And he did a piano cover that sounds really nice. A good recording of a piano. Really enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.